How did it start? Well, actually, Uwe and I, we go back to 2000. This is when I brought Uwe on board. It was even before the previous studio, and we were about to make a 3D online space, and we needed an architect to build that. And Uwe came along. Really getting into games, I think this was in the early 2000s with our previous studio. This is when 3D mobile gaming became a thing. And then Uwe was already part of the team. We added a few more talents from the local universities here in Hamburg, Germany. And then we had our first small team making 3D mobile games. And what's remarkable, it's like pretty much everybody from this very initial team is still with ROCKFISH games. Over the time, we really forged this team, and you build up the knowledge. Everybody knows each other, so they're really good working with each other. So they know their strengths and their weaknesses, right? And I think this is probably the strongest asset that we have in our company, that we have this veteran team, and then every now and then new people are joining, like new talents, make sure we get some fresh blood into the team and fill the gaps when somebody, either some people bring new technology or experience to the table. It's really the team that's the core, that's the strength of our studio.
What actually changed was the complexity of the games over the years. I remember back then when we started with the mobile games, we were able to launch, I think, 4 games in 6 months roughly. And of course, with different teams for different games, and maybe one team for a game was maybe 1 person or 2 or 3. And I remember back then, I was like writing a design document. I was doing all the level design, all the 3D modeling myself, and all the character design myself. And I had maybe 1 game designer or 1 programmer basically sitting next to me. And then I was also making all the UI elements and everything basically. And maybe a production time of 2 or 3 months. And now it's like, what is it? 5 years, 6 years, or a whole series like EVERSPACE, 10 years. I mean, that's a remarkable difference. All in all, it still follows the same principles.
Yeah, some voices in the industry say we're making the same games over and over for 20 years now, which to a certain degree is kind of true. Yeah, so space combat game, Galaxy Fire, was the first one that really stuck with our audience. But it really goes all the way back to the early 2000s, because when you were on these mobile phones, that was even before the iPhone. You couldn't do much. So this is why we came up with this. You have just a space fighter, then there's the sun, some asteroids, and some pew-pew, some nice explosions. And we really had to fine-tune the controls to make these very accessible, intuitive controls to work this on a numpad on your Sony Ericsson or your Nokia feature phone.
But what we also learned is how to work efficiently. I think this is really crucial. This is what we learned back then. Because, I mean, people often ask us, well, this is like how big is your team? And they're always surprised that it's just like maybe, 30 people doing all of this? And I think that the efficiency, like in team organization, production, and basically how much sense makes this and that element in the game. The meaning, create meaningful content in little time. And I think this we will learn from very beginning. And this is still our strength, I would say.
Yeah,
and this made us India after all.
And of course we have to. I mean, as an independent studio, without any investors, thank God, without any publishers breathing down our neck, yes, we have to make sure that we get along with the money that we earn. So basically we always have to make sure that the lights are on. And then we just make one game after the other. We really hit our milestones, make sure that we get the game out. And I think this is also what really helped doing early access. So while working with the community and get the feedback, at the same time having these regular updates every 3-4 months, really made sure that we work on features, that we don't break the game, that we can always ship the game. So this I think is very, very important. And it also helped us to keep our vision in check, because I mean, you can take any game, any game idea, and you can just make it too big, and then it takes too long, it becomes too costly, you don't make the money back. So really, I think this is these constraints that we had back in the mobile games days really helped us to get a vision that fits to how much time do we have and how much money do we have. I'd say it's like we are not very typical, because Christian and I, the founders, we're not part of the development team. So we're not creative directors, we're not game design directors, we're not technical directors. Heck, I can't write a single line of code. I get an idea what's happening. I do have a strong opinion on art and music, but we have our experts, right? And it's more Christian and I, we manage the team. And I try to predict what's hot in 5 years from now, because this is how far we throw a stone and say, this is where it lands, this is where we need to go. And then I basically leave it up to the team to come up with a strong vision and make the game, right?
But I think it's exactly that. You're stepping back from like the content involvement as a CEO, and you grant us the creative freedom so that we can tell what we want to say, in the game. And I think this goes for basically all of the disciplines and all the departments. They can bring something personal to the table, and it's respected. And I think that's also one of the reasons why people stay with us and don't leave after the project is over or after a couple of years. They stay with us because they feel respected.
Where did EVERSPACE start? Way before, actually, with Galaxy Fire. I think, Uwe, you should take on this one. Really, I mean, you work with a team, and
going back in time to the Java times, I think it actually started with Cloud Commander back then, our first shooter, like a flight shooter, I think it was, and that's the very first time we had the shooter mechanics in our studio.
Yeah. I remember I sold that project to Sony Ericsson back in the day because they had some marketing budget, and they wanted to have just games to put onto the Sony Ericsson devices and show what they can do. And literally in that meeting, that person asked me if I can come up with an idea, and then I came to this, what was it, 1942, that arcade game where you start with the tri-decker, double-decker, Bluemax, and these kind of games. So we could do this in 3D. And then she said, yeah, it's fine, I take that. And I came back from that meeting and I said, Uwe, so we have to do something like these arcade games. And then they came up with Cloud Commander, which I don't know, did it ever go live?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Yes, it did.
But it was never preloaded. Yeah. It was supposed to be preloaded onto the Sony Ericsson devices, and that deal fell through because they rather took some licensed game from the big publishers instead of the game that better showed what the phones were capable of. So,
yeah, but that was the first flight shooter. Then I think after that came Galaxy Fire 1 directly, right? Galaxy Fire 2 on Java, then on iPhone. And then we basically started with console development. And then we wanted to have a roguelike game based on flight mechanics.
Yeah, we kind of wanted to. So I recall when the team was pitching, hey, let's make a linear roguelike space shooter like FTL meets Freelancer. I was like, I don't know if our fans really would love that because they were used to this open world approach of Galaxy Fire.
We knew
but
that.
We had to. We didn't have the budget. We didn't have the team.
Yeah,
so yeah.
There was no way around.
Yeah. So it was the right decision, definitely. Yeah.
But this is how EVERSPACE was born, and this is how the story of Adam Roslin was created, because we needed someone who needed to get reborn after every death.
Yeah. So the name ROCKFISH Games actually, I don't want to say it was an incident or accident. It was like when we went through these hard patches with our previous studio. So we were thinking of like starting a new studio, had to come up with a new name. And everything was so, we were really between a hard place and a rock. And I thought, no, this is not the end. We're unbreakable. And I also wanted to keep the fish from Fish Labs, our previous studio. I wanted to keep that. And then, I really had that moment. I said, we're ROCKFISH. Also this rock star thing in there. Yeah, of course. And it kind of stuck with us. So in the initial plan, we thought we might get the old studio back and then we rename back to Fish Labs, but then I was like, nah, it doesn't feel right. We're not ROCKFISH. So Fish Labs was the old chapter, was finished. We had to leave the studio. We had to move on. And quite frankly, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to us, because it was really this hard reset. So there was no legacy. We could start from scratch. Uwe was joining as the first, and we only could start ROCKFISH games because of a AAA publisher assigning us for a work-for-hire project, also space shooter, surprise. And Uwe sat down with the producer, even before we ramped up the new studio, came up with a great concept, and we really connected with that producer, right? I still remember when you have these meetings.
Because of our legacy, Commodore 64 games and stuff, so this was something where we connected. But we also had like the same vision of like, what do we want here? Is it like a simulation, or is it like rather an action game? And I think we had the same vision of like how the space game of tomorrow should be for us. Yeah.
And funny anecdote, we had these meetings Christian had a friend, and he was a consultant for dentists, right? And so he had an office space. So we were meeting in this meeting room, and all on the wall, you had these big pictures of like rotten tooth, and it was really funny. And the producer of that publisher said, "That's an interesting studio." We're like, no, we're just here. It's an interim solution. We're gonna find a new studio when we get that deal from you guys. And then we got that deal, and then we had the challenge: where do you get the studio? Where can we start? Because you cannot go and rent a new studio if you don't know you had a new project, right? So I was out with a friend, and he met a friend, and that dude had a brother. And he told me, "Oh, we still have a garage, like an office space for 3 months." And I was like, "Interesting. What are you doing there?" And I said, "Yeah, we're gonna move out, and I just need to find somebody who takes on the 3 months." So that we would be interested. And then literally we built ROCKFISH games in a garage. And then we had our first 3 meetings with the producer of the AAA publisher. Then 10 from our previous team came over. We worked on that. And while we had these 3 months of time, then Christian, my partner, went on and searched on the internet for a bigger space, like the proper studio. And there was some serious pressure, because after 3 months, we wouldn't have had the facility anymore. And then that maniac, he built this studio all by himself with a big sledgehammer, knocked down the walls and everything. And he said, "Keep the publisher happy. I built us a great studio." And man, he did.
We were building the first playable back then, and the first studio in the same time.
And quite handy, Uwe is a full-blown architect. So Uwe could help Christian with like drawing the plans, and then the execution
plans,
here. Yeah, almost a bit too much at some point. Christian was like, "I know how to build this. I don't need an architect for every tiny detail."
Of course not.
So but then I think in summer, it was in August, we moved into this place, and it's fantastic. It's open space and good energy, and it's really good to be in a place where we're not too cramped. And I think what's kind of surprising when COVID, the pandemic hit, and we all moved back to our homes and worked from there. And at the beginning, we weren't certain if this is going to fly, but it really worked well for us. It almost feels like everybody had to discipline themselves to really get their work better organized. And now we have a mixture of like coming to the studio regularly, make sure that the social glue is still there. So we have a monthly barbecue, and we have a big summer fest. But other than that, we're working from home. It works pretty great. And that also helped us to become a more international studio. So we had a few hires. Now we have somebody from the US, Canada, UK, and even Japan, right? Who's a French dude. So hello to Jeremy. And
but even before, we had people like sitting in many corners of the world before COVID already. So it's not entirely new.
It's not entirely, but you say, well, the people that you work on a daily basis. So for me, working with Lee in Canada, so my days are a little bit longer now, because he's 8 hours after us. So catching Jeremy in the morning for Japan is a bit early.
Sometimes I had Toby in Tokyo. Then I had the guys in Malaysia, Streamline.
Yeah.
Then I had, of course, Europe, UK,
Right, then Volta in Canada.
Yeah, in Canada, like East Coast, West Coast, all in one day.
Yeah.
Before COVID even,
Yeah.
So.
And then the sound recording in LA.
Exactly.
So Ray Chase.
Night shift, yeah.
So, a lot of things in these 10 years, and hell of a ride. I can say for sure. And so it's really, sometimes you look back on what happened and how you got there. You can never say how you get to a certain point. You can always connect the dots in the past. I know Steve Jobs said that, and it really makes sense. It's so hard to predict where you're going to be in 5 or even 10 years. But on the other hand, I have to say, when we started with EVERSPACE, we're like, okay, first we do this linear roguelike, and then if this is a commercial success, then maybe we can go all in and make an open world space combat game with EVERSPACE 2. And yeah, we still have a lot of ideas to make even a better game, but that's for later. That's for the next 10 years.
I mean, we had the rogue mechanic of like being born over and over again in an ever ongoing vicious cycle, if you want, so that you needed to break. This is where the ever thing came from. And then, yeah, where does it take place? Yeah, in space. So it's actually quite obvious and yeah, not so far-fetched to call it EVERSPACE. And this was, and we were thinking it over weeks and months if it was the right.
Yeah, I think that like 20 title suggestions.
And more. And we were like sitting down, is it like really the thing? And what happens if it's not a roguelike anymore? Well, yeah.
So we have
which is the case now, but yeah, EVERSPACE is there and nobody really like, well, what? Why do you call it EVERSPACE still? You know, I mean, yeah.
But it also resonates with our story, so we keep on telling the story, and it goes on forever and ever, and then there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. So yeah, we felt it really resonates what we're doing, and now we can even play with it, really. And
yeah, and there's EverQuest. Of course,
yeah, we get that quite a lot.
EverQuest, and it's kind of like sounds similar, but it's different. Yeah. So, but it worked fine, and it still does. So, yeah.
Yeah. Why dropping the core loop if often a successful game? That's true. So I get this a lot from the press and the media when we launched EVERSPACE 2. So the first one was successful. Why it's not a linear roguelike? And yeah, to be honest, it's. This is what the majority of our fans wanted, and also what I personally prefer, and just to have a bigger game. And it opens up way more possibilities. Because I also have to admit that linear roguelike, I remember when we were doing cutscenes, and you have a procedurally generated environment, things became much more complicated because you don't know exactly where the asteroids are, the ships are, and whatnot.
It's all true, and I mean, it all comes with difficulties, but it also comes with virtues, you know. So I actually liked the experiment. It was also the first roguelike game that we made back then. But to me, it was actually appealing, and it was also quite fashionable, you know, to do roguelikes back then. But I thought it was all the constraints and all the limitations we had made this thing possible at all. So it's embrace your limitations and see where you can get. And this is how all this was created. And that's the reason why we have our hero, Adam Rostin. It's a reason why it's called EverSpace. And even the world design, to a certain extent, the faction design, the character design is based on this initial decision. That's, yeah. But still, I'm with you. I didn't want to do this initially in the first place. And with Galaxy on Fire, we already had open world games, and this is what we actually always wanted to do. And this is why the switching from roguelike to open world is rather switching back to what we already knew. So it's nothing like, oh, open world, for Christ's sake. And we kind of knew already how this is done on in a mobile game, and now it's on a console game. So,
but we also have to give credit to the team, because both core loops, EVERSPACE 1 and EVERSPACE 2, came from the team. So it was really the idea of that core team say, well, we're going to meet freelancer means FTL, or FTL meets freelancer, the roguelike mechanics, they brought that to the table. And there was a good hunch, a good sense for what's good. So it was right time, right place. Roguelikes were super popular in 2015, and it was the right approach for us with the budget that we had and the team size that we were, but also for EVERSPACE 2. So we said we wanted to have something that had this immediacy, that you really can get into it. But you also have this feeling, one more run, you do it again and again and again. And they came up with this Diablo meets Freelancer. It's Diablo in space. And I have to admit, I only played Diablo 1 and I got heavily butchered by the butcher back in the 90s and was like, oh, wait, that's too much. But they played Diablo 2, 3, 4. So they really knew what this hook in Diablo, this hack and slay or hack and slash in space, that's what they came up with. And I think this, again, it was a good hunch, good sense for what is sticky, what's addicting gameplay, what really keeps you motivated and on the edge of your seat for hours and hours and hours in gameplay. And then Uwe could go with the art team and design a beautiful world that's worth exploring, and there are secrets everywhere it's hidden, and then everything came together.
I mean, the studio itself didn't really grow so super extensively if you compare it to EVERSPACE 1 and 2. This is quite a growth in complexity, in numbers, but the team ramped up maybe like in proportion way less. That's a little surprising, because when I look back at Fish Labs, when we made like more extensive titles, all of a sudden, team sizes exploded and project management and project planning and all this friction like increased exponentially. And this didn't happen with EVERSPACE 2. So with a relatively small size, we were able to like build way bigger and way more complex project. And now if I look at it in retrospect, it surprises me. But of course, I was like living all this process, and I just like thought, nothing really ever changed. But the game became bigger and more ambitious, and we're still able to do it in our, say, traditional way to work with each other, and in our like custom way to do the project planning and to do the releases over time. And it felt natural and felt comfortable,
I think
that's a surprise.
What really helped is that we had only one project. Mm-hmm. In our previous studio, there was a lot of fighting for survival, right? Let's call it what it is or what it was. So we did work for hire, we did our own titles. Oftentimes we did several work for hire titles at the same time. Then there was this from premium to free to play, this major shift in the business model. And there was, as you said, there was so much friction between teams, but also, again, what's the strategy for the studio? And with ROCKFISH Games and just working on EVERSPACE, just one title, and then only PC and console, only premium, no in-app purchase, no battle passes, no microtransactions. It was so crystal clear what we're doing. And this is why we can say, okay, this is what we want to achieve in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and maybe remove the goalpost just a little bit, just slightly, but it's not like that you're constantly pivoting. So we really could execute on the vision that we had. And I think that helped a lot and made it very concise.
Mm-hmm. What also surprised me a little bit, and even after having developed mobile games for so many years, to get like a stronger connection to our audience through Kickstarter. And now, if I look at it, of course, you get this personal relation to those who are backing your project and those who are like believing in you even without having any product in their hands, and just like living by a promise. But that actually surprised me, and we did have a lot of fans, or we still have them from the mobile days. Like, thanks again a lot for their support. But the same guys actually supported us during the Kickstarter campaign, and it made, at least I can speak for me and maybe also for you, a way stronger connection to our fans, and some of them, they're working for us today.
Yeah, I mean, you won't get more direct feedback as from Kickstarters and also early access later on. But you're right. I think Kickstarters is again on a different level, because there's no product at all. There's just a promise, and there are other Kickstarter campaigns that didn't deliver. So of course, people are always wary. Is it really happening? Are the guys get enough funding, because typically the funds from the Kickstarter are not, by far not enough to complete the game. So there's a big chance that the game never sees the day of light. And then people from around the world trusting us, and that's an amazing compliment. And if you feel even more invested to your Kickstarter backers and early access pilots, than somebody who gets the game when it's out already. We appreciate it, of course, but somebody, they're not investing in a financial term into the company, but they're on board. They want to be part of this, and then they become part of it, and this feels extremely rewarding. And I gotta say, we're super grateful for all the commercial success that we have, because that's the foundation that enables us to do what we can do.
Without that,
yeah. But the fulfilling part is really the feedback that you get from Kickstarter backers, early access users, regular users, really about the hard work what we do here. And
it was, I think, almost the most motivating aspect for me, or one of the most motivating aspects, just like to live up to the expectations that the early adopters and those who believed in you, and not to disappoint them. Yeah. It's not just one release, like one bullet that you fire and it's like a hit and miss. You do have, like, over those many updates that we made, an open development process where you have your dedicated fan base inspiring you, providing feedback, testing your product, correcting mistakes, or correcting the course towards like a product where they think is the right thing. It's not a must, but it's a huge help to like to assure that we made the right choices.
It gives you more flexibility during development. It gives you more security, because you get more feedback on, are you actually making the right game? Are you on the right track? Instead of like locking yourself in for 5 years and then betting big and you don't know if this is gonna fly or not. So this is why it really feels like we never would do another game without early access, because you simply don't know. You don't know if this is the right game you're making, if you're hitting the nerve, where's the market in 5 years from now. So yeah, makes total sense.
And it's not only that you get the feedback from the early access audience, it's also for ourselves. It helps a lot to like commit the development to certain corner points that are fixed, that you can't really change that much anymore. And in other development cycles that are like 5 or 10 years long, and I don't want to list names here now, it's for too long. The decisions are vague and it's undecisive, and many times a waste of potential and opportunity if you don't commit the team to like the first early access release and then all those updates. Just it takes too long.
And there's one more thing. It's not that the team is always aligned on which direction we should go. And sometimes, again, there are big fights. Everybody's very emotional, very passionate about this feature should be this way, no, it's this way. And then, you know what? Who's right? The market is right. The market is always right. So you release a product, and in early access is an update. And then if there's a huge backlash, then you probably should work on that feature. And the best example is with level scaling that we had. So some people were in the camp of like, you should feel powerful and you can steamroll over your enemies. And others in our team said, well, no, there should always be a challenge. And this is why levels should scale. And I feel sympathy for both sides. And I wasn't able to say, well, this is the right way to do it. And then we took the feedback from early access, changed the game, and now I think we have the best of both worlds by combining the two mechanics. And yeah, of course, there's still people who would have loved us to just have the one thing, just have no level scaling at all, or then the other camp still have it in there. But I think it's a good blend. And we only did that because of the feedback from the community. We wouldn't have done that major change without early access, and was definitely the right thing to do.
And there's the active feedback, and there's also the passive feedback, and the like analyzing players' behaviors, So it's like on both sides. You really see you can prove it by numbers, you can prove it by the vocal minority, and you can prove it by analyzing the active feedback.
Although vocal minority can be dangerous, so people who are happy typically they don't drop so much feedback, and proportionally there are way more people when if they're not happy they raise their voices. So you have to be careful about that. We thought about other genres, and we even had a pitch series when we were in a situation where we had to have find another work for hire project. There was after the first project for ROCKFISH games was canceled, then there was a short time was we have to find something else. Space games are really hard to sell to publishers, and then we tried to come up with a couple ideas, and the team came up with ideas, and I think there was some great stuff in there. We even worked on a prototype. It was kind of cool. But again, we couldn't find funding for this, and in the end, we are in this niche and making space combat exploration games, and we're pretty good at it. And according to the market, we're very good at it. And then it feels like, why change? It's so risky to try something else. Imagine we tried another genre, we lock ourselves in for 1 or 2 years, make a prototype, go to the market. It doesn't take off. Then we have burned through the cash, and then what? And then you have a problem immediately, then we have to go to a publisher, and we are not independent anymore. So as much as the team sometimes raises voices, we should do something else. And I hear that, I feel that. I'd be tempted too, but commercially, it's just too risky these days. It's like the games that we're making, the first EVERSPACE was like €5 million in development budget. Then the base game of EVERSPACE 2 is now more than 15 million. Then with the post-launch content, it's another 5. This is, it's a very, very risky business. So the chances are low that we're doing something else.
Yeah, and it's not that we didn't try other genres already back in the mobile age, you know. I think altogether we have launched, I don't know how many titles, I can't count them anymore.
More than 25, easy, and all kind of genres.
And this was already like a test balloon for our team. What can you do best? And it's the space game.
And it's also, what is your competition doing? Because you can be the best team in the world and you do something great, right time, right place, great success, wrong time, wrong place, you're dead. So if there's too much competition, you can be super talented, you make a great game, but you just go under if another big title is launching at the same week. So I have the feeling that being in the space combat niche, being one of the top studios out there, we're kind of safe as long as we don't rock the boat too much.
Yeah, back then, I mean, even before we had Adam's story, I think we were quite sure that we had this ever-repeating cycle in a sci-fi world that we are dealing with clones and clone or replicant stories. And then, of course, Blade Runner was maybe one inspiration. Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, and Repeat principle. Another movie called Moon. It's an indie movie, but maybe also quite known, where all those clone stories with and the clones not knowing that there were clones or that they were like discriminated because there were replicants or clones and needed to live like a life in an underground life, persecuted by the authorities, not being able to live a normal life, but still having the need to be human, to become human at some point. Transplanted memories, not knowing, are those memories really my own memories? Do they come from someone else? And who is this body? Who am I a property of a government or of the military? And it's still having this strong will to live and to survive and to write your own personal story. I think those were all those inspirations from movies, literature, and other games. Detroit Become Human, another inspiration, video game.
And I recall we talked about, I think it was called The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger, where the villain has this cloning facility, and in the end he was cloning himself So he was like almost finished, then was cloning himself, and the new clone finished off the villain before. And then he said, how can you do that? He said, dude, I'm like you. Of course I'm finishing you off. I found that super strong, this super badass villain. And then we talked about the issue of Adam not like being the hero that he always wanted to be, or like being forced into this hero journey, and then meeting his clone father. And then the clone father realizing that while he was just trying to replicate himself, to repair himself, that in the end, he was sending a human being onto the journey. And then having this second thoughts and...
This came as a surprise, but in the end, it would have been just to kill himself or to kill his son. And then why do the memory transfer if this is already like your son, your body, your DNA?
Yeah.
Just leave it be. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the genre of space games, we've seen quite a lot, right? I mean, from Elite Dangerous, pretty much the first really big space game. And then I think a major milestone there was definitely Star Citizen, that super massive crowdfunding, and now it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. This really live in this world. I think it's a great vision, very, very ambitious. Then certainly No Man's Sky, all of a sudden landing on a planet and exploration. I think they really got that, so they had a good sense, a good hunch for what people want. Yeah, and then for us, I think EVERSPACE, but also with Galaxy and Fire, what we brought to the table is this: make a space combat game as intuitive and accessible as possible. I think this is what we do, where we excel, and really also go outside of the typical space game audience. So that works quite well. And yeah, and then you have something like the X series that's super complex, that really combines, fighting, exploration, trading, crafting, base building. I mean, Jesus, this is a huge game. And I think all have their, I don't want to say their niche, but their direction. And it's worthwhile executing and do that. And then, of course, we had Starfield, Fallout in Space. People were very excited about that. That shows where the appetite is. The thing is with space game fans, they want everything, right? So they want the big ships, want the small ships, on a planet, VR, of course, trading, mining, and there's only so much we can do. So we have to pick our battles wisely. Technology-wise, I think the most interesting thing is this data streaming, seamless streaming. So in Unreal Engine 4, we still had the issue that if we go from one location to another, there's a short loading/initialization period, because we also were working with different scenes. So with better tech, then you can have these transitions more seamlessly or entirely seamless. I think this is something that's interesting to watch. Then obviously Lumen and Nanite. So I think it takes us 48 hours to do the light cell calculation for our handcrafted locations in EverSpace 2. So I know that Marco, our lead artist, is very excited about Lumen. Maybe for our next title. What's next?
Can we tell?
Well,
are we allowed to say that?
I mean, we can share. So what we can share is the team is working on bringing the base game to Unreal Engine 5 right now. There are a lot of things that are broken, from widgets in 2D, and the whole particle animations are broken. Physics is a big headache. All our puzzles that were made with a different physics technology are now broken, so we had to redesign them and fix them. But we're going to track, so we're making good progress here. Then there's going to be a free update coming in spring this year, but we're also working on more premium content coming later this year. So still a lot of plans, and after that, yeah, we have to see how it goes. It's like we don't try to predict too much too far into the future, like stay focused on the next milestones that are ahead. But yeah, I'm very excited for the new stuff, and Uwe showed me some animatics and in-game cutscenes of the new content that's coming, and I think it looks really amazing.